We were told the house had been cleared. I'd signed off on it myself, but in February of '62, I went back, alone, no orders. Just a key, and a knot in my throat I couldn't swallow anymore. What I found inside wasn't a security breach. It was a secret buried in brick, and a voice I'd once promised would be heard again. They never trained us for guilt that echoes, and they never told me she left something behind. Before I shut up again, hit that like button, subscribe if this is making your skin itch already, and tell me what city you're listening from, and what time it is. I need to know I'm not the only one still hearing this. The snow was still crusted in the gutters when I walked up Glagor Street again. Kreuzberg looked the same: graffiti, cracked sidewalks, laundry frozen stiff on balconies. But the house had aged differently. Too clean, too sealed, too deliberate. I turned the key. It stuck halfway, like the door hadn't been used in months, or like it didn't want to open. Inside, the air had that sour stillness. No dust on the furniture, no footprints. Just a faint scent of lime and mold. It had been a safe house during the months before the wall closed off the sector. 3 operations had cycled through here. One had gone wrong, badly. The girl we called her Marion was part of it. I wasn't her handler, not officially, but I told her she'd be safe here. That lie still lives in my mouth. The living room was untouched, but the back hallway told another story. The paint on one wall was newer, barely perceptible, but I'd seen enough plaster jobs in cover houses to spot the difference. The texture wasn't just wrong, it was hiding something. About 1 meter wide, no reason for it to be sealed. Not there. I ran my hand over it. Cold, soundless. There wasn't supposed to be anything left behind. After November, the house was meant to be stripped, disconnected, buried in protocol. And yet this wall, it looked like it had been built in a rush, like someone had something to hide. And no time, I went to the kitchen, found an old wooden spoon, tapped the wall. Hollow. The sound traveled too far for a structural beam. It was a cavity, something small, something concealed. Not an error, not neglect. Intention. I knew God. Help me. I knew I'd signed off on this. I went to my car, popped the trunk, pulled my field kit. The tools were old, rusted at the edges. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but memory. The kind of tremor that comes from touching something you buried. Back inside, I drove the flathead screwdriver into the edge of the new plaster. It gave too easily. 1 pull. 2. Then a small section cracked and fell away. White powder exploded into the air like ash. I coughed, my eyes stung, but I kept digging, not sure if I was hoping to find nothing or everything. Behind the panel, a sliver of space. No light, no air vents, just a darkness that felt still. I reached in. My fingers grazed something soft. Fabric. Froze. This wasn't just a hidden cache or intel drop. It was a hiding place, or worse, a holding place, and someone had meant for it never to be opened again. I backed away and sat on the floor, legs numb, the plaster dust clinging to my coat. I remembered Marion's last transmission. It was brief, unusual. She had said, "The corridor isn't safe. I'll wait." No one followed up. No one extracted her. There were rumors of a double agent, but the report said she'd made it across. We toasted her freedom that night. I signed the document confirming site closure. And now, years later, I was peeling that same wall with my own hands, like a man digging through his own alibi. I leaned closer. A faint scent of iron and mold hit me again. Not fresh. Old. Preserved. Like someone had once lived in there, or died trying. Wanted to believe it was just a supply cache. But I knew better. And that was the moment I stopped being afraid of ghosts, because I was one of them. I wasn't there for answers. I didn't need redemption or clarity or any of the noble things people search for when they dig into the past. I went back to that house because I couldn't sleep without hearing it, the tapping, the voice, the breath. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I did believe in mistakes that echo. And the worst part was, the echo was starting to sound like my own name. The night after I cracked open that wall, I drank half a bottle of bourbon in the bathtub and still couldn't numb it. The image of that narrow space haunted me, the dirty cloth, the chipped enamel cup, the presence of someone who had waited long enough to rot, but not enough to be erased. I dreamed of her hand, reaching out from inside the plaster, tapping slow, rhythmic, like Morse code from the other side. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat and gripping the headboard like it was a lifeline. My throat was raw, as if I'd screamed something in my sleep. A name, maybe. But I wouldn't say it out. Loud dot in the office, tucked inside the old files, I found the form I'd signed. The ink was faded, but my signature stood out, deliberate, practiced. It was from March of '61. Site transfer authorization. Neutralization non-lethal. I didn't remember writing it, but there it was. My own letters, my own hand, as if I'd drawn a line between loyalty and humanity and decided which one deserved the bullet. Returned to the safe house 2 nights later. Same key, same silence. But this time I stood in front of the wall for hours before doing anything. I pressed my ear to it. Nothing. I whispered her name just once. Low enough, it might have just been a thought. No answer. I pressed my palm, flat against the plaster, like that might undo it. My skin felt cold, almost wet. I pulled back and stared at the print left behind. For a moment, I thought there was another, smaller one, just beneath mine. But maybe that was just dust. I kept dreaming about the tapping. In the dream, I'd run through endless hallways, and behind every door was the same wall, sealed tight, humming like it had lungs. The fear wasn't in what I might find. It was in knowing I'd been part of the sealing, the locking in. And now I couldn't stop hearing her voice, Marion saying something over and over. Not pleading, not accusing, just dot, dot repeating. Some nights I thought I heard it in the pipes. Some nights in the radiator. But it always ended the same. I'd wake up with my hand clenched into a fist, and that damn taste of lime and plaster in my mouth. I didn't go to command. I didn't tell. The agency. There's no form for this kind of guilt. No protocol for unsealing what was never meant to exist. I was the only one left who knew where that house had been placed, who had the key, who had seen the original blueprint. And the more I tried to forget, the clearer it became. Not just the wall, the smell, the sound. Her face when she asked, "What? If they never come back for me?" I think I told her, "They will. I will." And then I signed. Maybe not the next day. Maybe not in front of her, but I signed. That part, I can't scrub away, that it wasn't justice I was afraid of. It was confirmation. If I kept digging, I'd know for sure that I had buried someone alive in the name of silence. And yet I kept coming back, because sometimes silence scratches from the inside out. I arrived just before dawn, when the streets of Kreuzberg still looked like shadows of themselves. No light from the upper floors, no movement. The city was frozen in that breathless hour before it remembers it's alive. I let myself in quietly, out of habit more than caution, and stepped back into the hollow house like I was returning to a wound. The floor was as I'd left it, cold, quiet, but the dust had changed. Not gone, disturbed, patterns too straight. To be random, lines trailing into corners. Curved prints like someone had crouched and waited. Not a vagrant, not an officer. Someone who knew where to step. In the back room, where I'd opened the wall, the difference was louder. The air felt moved. The particles didn't hang still. They drifted, carried by something more recent than memory. I ran my hand along the edge of the cavity. The plaster. I'd torn now flaked naturally, exposed to time. But next to it, just an inch beyond where I'd stopped, there was a patch that sounded different when I tapped. I knew that sound. Hollow, intentional, built fast, sealed tight, meant to be forgotten. That someone else had come after me and stopped short of opening it. I opened my kit again, hands steadier this time, not out of confidence, but surrender. If there was something to find, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I pressed the flat edge into the seam and peeled back another piece. The white broke differently here, smoother, cleaner, like it had been sealed more recently. Beneath it, nestled like a secret wrapped in guilt, was a small metal box, about the size of a lunch tin. I pulled it out slowly, dust cascading around it like ash. No label, no lock, just a faint stamp on the top, a consular seal. American. Sat back on the floor and stared at it. My reflection swam across the dull metal surface. I didn't recognize the man looking back. I wasn't thinking of clearance levels or chain of command. I was thinking of Marion, of her voice when she said she didn't want to vanish, didn't want to become a file. I should have told her then that we all become files. That's the only safe ending the agency offers. I opened the box. Inside was a small envelope, warm and creased at the corners. A few black and white photographs, most of them slightly warped by moisture. One showed a child near a train station. Another, Marion in a gray coat, staring just off camera, eyes too tired for her age. Beneath them was a folded piece of paper, the ink smudged but legible. One sentence, no soy lo que dijeron, no firms. My throat clenched. The handwriting was unmistakable. I'd seen it on mission briefs, on hotel registers, on the back of photos we burned. It was hers. It wasn't a note for me. It was a warning, left in case someone else found this. But it found me, and I had signed. Not a confession, a confirmation, a blind compliance turned execution. And next to the note, in a small glassine envelope, was something even worse, a lock of hair, blonde, curled tight, like it had been preserved carefully, as if someone believed memory could be bottled. Or maybe it was proof that she had existed, that someone cared. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer. I folded the note again, gently, like it might fall apart from being remembered. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. But something inside me shifted like a foundation, cracking under pressure it had held too long. I didn't know what she meant. By no firms, not exactly. But I knew what I had done, and I wasn't sure anymore whether I had come here to bury the past or let it dig me out. I returned that evening with a crowbar. No kit, no gloves, just the cold steel and a cigarette burning too fast between my fingers. The house swallowed the sound of the door closing behind me. I didn't bother with the lights. I went straight to the wall. I didn't hesitate this time. The crowbar slid into the cavity I'd opened and cracked another seam loose, then another. The sound echoed differently now, like breath in a jar. Hollow, but alive in its own way. The bricks gave after a few strikes. Behind them was a pocket no larger than a crawl space. Maybe 3 feet deep, 1 meter tall, enough to kneel in, enough to wade in. The kind of space no architect would design. The kind of space only someone afraid would build. Inside, a folded blanket, dirty and stiff. A chipped enamel cup with rust creeping along the rim. And in the far corner, resting against the wall like it had been set there with trembling hands, a small box. Same seal as before, but this one had scratches on the surface, Deep gouges, like someone had tried to claw it open, or like it had been gripped too hard for too long. I didn't step inside. I knelt outside the wall and reached in slowly, as if touching the edge of a grave that never got filled. The air inside was still. No scent this time, no rot, just the unmistakable weight of presence. Like something had once breathed here and left part of itself behind. I pulled the box out and placed it beside me. I didn't open it, not yet. My eyes kept going back to the cup. It was half full. Liquid long evaporated, but the ring it left behind was recent. I brushed my thumb against the inside. Damp, not dust, moisture. My brain told me it was condensation, but my gut whispered something else. I sat there for what felt like hours, not moving, not thinking, just listening. Then I heard it, a single drip dot from inside the wall, followed by silence, dot then another dot, steady dot, methodical dot, like time was bleeding through the plaster. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but all I could hear was the echo of that dripping like a clock counting backward. Opened the box, slowly, carefully. Inside was a photograph, black and white. Marion again, same coat. This time seated, looking at the camera. Her hands were cuffed, but her face was calm. Behind her, the unmistakable outline of this room before the wall. Before we decided she was safer forgotten, underneath the photo, a small recording reel, labeled only with a number, 10643B. No date, no names. The box had been set there like a message, or a marker, and I had just exhumed it. Looked back into the cavity dot. It didn't feel empty anymore, that it felt like something still lived in there, not a body. Decision. And I had been its architect. I didn't listen to the reel right away. I carried it with me like a wound, tucked deep in the inside pocket of my coat, afraid it might bleed if exposed to light. Instead, I focused on the box, as if some piece of her still lingered inside, held there by time or guilt or both. I laid out the contents on the floor of the safe house, one by one, careful not to touch anything more than I had to. The photographs were different this time. Not surveillance shots. Personal. Intimate in a way that made my stomach turn. Marion, standing in front of a bookstore. Marion holding a paper cup of coffee, looking at someone just out of frame. Marion asleep on a train, head resting against the window, unaware the camera was even there. These weren't ours. They weren't from the agency. These were hers, or someone close enough to have been trusted with her silence. I found a small envelope folded into quarters beneath the stack. Inside, a lock of hair tied with a blue thread, and next to it, a single handwritten line on torn stationery. No soy lo Jaren. No firms. The words hit harder now. I'd already seen the same phrase once, but reading it again, in her unmistakable handwriting, surrounded by things only she could have left this time, it felt like a scream. I signed something in '61. That much I know. I don't remember the details. It was a relocation order, or so they said. Standard closure protocol. But nothing about Marion had ever been standard. She had too much access, asked too many questions, got too close to something none of us were supposed to understand. I was told she'd been reassigned. West Sector, low contact. But now I knew better. We didn't reassign her. We walled her in. I tried to remember who else had been at the debrief. Names blurred, faces melted into gray. But I remembered the pen I used, how it dragged across the carbon paper, how someone nodded when I handed it back, like I'd done the right thing. There was a photo folded twice over, creased to the point of tearing. I unfolded it slowly. Marion again barefoot, sitting on the floor in this very house, the same corner I'd just opened. No cuffs this time, just eyes hollowed by waiting. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't angry. Just ... resigned. I flipped it over. A scribble on the back. If you find this, don't forget me. Forget me. I lit a cigarette with shaking hands and stared at the photo until the ash burned my fingers. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I pressed the cigarette out against the wall and watched the plaster flake, wondering if any of her skin had touched that same surface, wondering how long she'd waited before realizing no one was coming back. The lock of hair was real. The photographs were real. The note was real. The guilt was mine. I couldn't escape the geometry of it. A space built to be forgotten. A girl turned into evidence. A man too cowardly to remember what he'd done until it was too late. I packed everything back into the box and closed the lid. Then I rewound the reel, because hearing her voice again, that was the only thing I feared more than forgetting it. I set the reel on my desk like it might bite. No markings beyond the number. Number. Indication of origin or clearance level. Just a brittle magnetic tape and a hum in my chest I couldn't quiet. I threaded it through an old Player One of the few relics I still kept from my field days and pressed play, half hoping the machine would reject it. But it didn't. The tape caught. The wheels turned. And then came the sound. First, static. Then something that could have been breathing, or wind, or the space between two very old walls learning how to echo again. Then her voice clear, flat, reciting a sequence. Numbers, coordinates, repeated 3 times. Then silence. Another voice followed. Mine. Younger, sharper. The voice I had before conscience began to corrode it. Wait here, I said. Just a few days. It's safer this way. Then more silence. More breathing. Then the click of a door closing. I stopped the tape. My hand hovered over the player. I wanted to rewind, erase, pretend I hadn't heard it. But I hit play again. Same voice. Same words. Same abandonment. I didn't remember recording it, but I couldn't deny it. That tone, that professional distance draped over panic, that was me. I'd told her to wait. I'd walked away, not under duress, not under orders, just standard precaution. It's safer this way. I closed my eyes and listened a third time. On this pass, I caught something I'd missed. At the end, barely audible. A thump, then another, slow, rhythmic, and then a voice, distant and thin, muffled by brick. Hello. It repeated. Again. Again. Then the reel ended. I sat there for minutes, still, not breathing, not blinking. Just a man pinned between magnetic tape and the sound of someone he left behind calling through time. I needed to know more. Drove back to the house. Midnight. Streets empty. The kind of silence that dares you to break it. I brought contact microphones. Tools we used in surveillance when we needed to hear through walls. Crude tech by today's standards, but still precise enough to betray secrets buried in concrete. Inside, I connected them along the remaining plaster. Every few inches, every shift in temperature, every odd seam. Headphones on. Dials turned. And THEN, I heard it. Not a voice this time. Not a recording. A drip. Then 2. Then a faint dragging sound, like something soft moving against a hard surface. I pulled the headphones off. Sat perfectly still. Then the wall thud. DED. Once. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The microphones confirmed it. The sound was real. I replayed the reel on a loop while monitoring the wall. The dragging returned. Then silence. Then, barely audible, like breath caught in static. Don't forget. No explanation. No accusation. Just presence. Something was still behind that wall. And maybe I'd never left it. I started sleeping inside the house. Not because I had to, but because the idea of leaving it alone felt worse than the silence it carried. I set up a cot in the front room, where the moonlight bled through the sheer curtains and made the dust dance like ash. I didn't touch the back wall again. I didn't have to. Whatever lived behind it had found another way out. The first time I saw her shadow, I blamed the bourbon. It slid across the plaster in the hallway like a memory learning how to stand. Thin, feminine, unmoving. I turned the lamp toward it. Nothing. Blank wall. I turned it off. The shape returned. I stood there, watching it breathe until the cigarette burned down to my knuckles. I tried recording the space again. Left the reel turning through the night. When I played it back the next morning, the tape was almost silent until the 40-minute mark. A whisper, barely perceptible. Only a few days, my voice. But not from any previous recording. This one was strained, slower, worn like a confession whispered too many times. I walked to the wall and placed my palm flat against it. Cold, but not lifeless. Something had been buried here. Not just a person, a decision, a truth we never filed. Something the agency didn't authorize and wouldn't acknowledge. We didn't lock her in. We removed her from record, from accountability. A ghost without a grave, and I was part of that process. I opened my field notes from '61, pages I hadn't read in years, scrawled dates, sketches, procedural jargon. But one line stood out now, etched near the margin in a hand that wasn't mine. Don't forget what silence costs. I couldn't place who wrote it, but I remembered who was in the room when I closed the file. 3 agents, 1 supervisor, 1 translator, and me, the junior analyst who hadn't yet learned the weight of a signature. I closed the notebook and lit another cigarette, stared at the space where the wall had changed color, where she might have been, where she might still be, in a way none of us had the language to name. That night, I heard her footsteps, not loud, not dragging, just steady dot down the hallway, past the front room, into the kitchen. I didn't move. I didn't speak. A chair creaked. A faucet hissed for half a second. Then silence again out in the morning. The chair was pulled out from the table. I hadn't touched it, and in the layer of dust on the floor, a single trail of prints, barefoot, small. I swept them away, not to hide them, not to make sure. I'd notice if they came back, and when I looked into the mirror over the kitchen sink, I didn't see my own eyes. I saw hers. I went to Clearly because I needed something official to hold in my hands. A file, a memo, a scrap of paper that told me this wasn't just guilt fermenting in a hollow house. The agency's Berlin records were kept in a basement that smelled like wet ink and dyeing leather. The clerk didn't recognize me, which was good. I wasn't supposed to be active. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I asked for records related to Safe House 17G, Logarstrage. The clerk blinked at me like I'd said something indecent. He checked a register, pretended to look busy, told me there was no such designation. I said there must be. He told me to come back with clearance. I didn't leave. I waited until he stepped out to smoke, then slipped behind the counter and into the archive room. I knew where they kept the burn logs, the files marked for destruction, but never properly erased. Half of the pages were scorched, some fused at the edges, others crumbling at touch. I scanned them quickly, skipping names, hunting for that address. And I found it, or what was left of it, a torn file. Singed but legible. Subject, M. Cody name, Ursula. Status, testigo no confiable. Prioridad, neutralization via encierro, no execution. Underneath, typed in uppercase, nitrogen monoxide visita, no traslado. My signature was at the bottom. FEBRERO, 1961, I stared at it for a long time. My name, my initials, in ink, I didn't remember. Laying down, my pulse slowed, then jumped. I traced the letters with my finger, as if trying to relearn them. The strokes were mine. That subtle drag on the lowercase g. That sharp hook on the R. It wasn't forged. I had signed. And apparently, I had done so under something they called Directive F-13, Encierro sin código. I'd never heard of it. Not in training, not in briefings. It wasn't part of protocol. It was a ghost order, one that removed a person without. Killing them made them vanish without blood. Legalized forgetting. I stuffed the page into my coat. No copies, no trace. On my way out, I passed the clerk again. He didn't even look up. Outside, the sun felt like glass. Everything was too bright, too real. I found a bench and sat. I had put her in that room, not because I hated her, not because I knew what she'd done, but because someone told me she needed to disappear. And I obeyed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I stared at them like they belonged to someone else, someone who followed orders, someone who said, "Just a few days," and closed a door and signed a paper and didn't think twice. But now, the sound of that pen dragging across the line was louder than any scream I'd ever heard. And when I looked up, I thought I saw her. Walking past, same coat, same hair, same gait, but she didn't turn around. She never did. I brought the mirror back from the house without knowing why. It was small, maybe 6 inches across, with a tarnished frame and a crack running through the corner like a vein. It had been tucked behind the last box in the wall, face down. I shouldn't have touched it. Should have left it buried with the rest of her silence. But something about it felt unfinished. I placed it on the desk in my apartment, next to the reel player. At night, it caught reflections from the street lamp outside, shards of light across the ceiling, flickering like distant Morse. I couldn't stop looking at it, not directly, just enough to catch glimpses. Movements that weren't mine, shadows that didn't match. There was a phrase etched into the back in delicate German. Script, "Du hast mich gewählt." You chose me. I read it aloud once, and the room felt colder. I stared into the glass, expecting to see the version of myself I'd learned to tolerate. But instead, I saw the boy they trained, the one who still believed there was a clean side. To war, he was younger, but the eyes were wrong, too hollow, too old. He didn't blink. The mirror didn't reflect the room behind me. It reflected the past. It reflected the space behind that wall. I smashed it on instinct. Shards flew across the desk. One sliced my palm. I didn't react, just watched the blood bead and drip onto the photograph of Marion, which I'd left half folded beside the tape reel. And I realized something. I was no longer the one watching. I was being watched, not in the surveillance sense, not wiretaps or shadows behind parked cars. This was different. This was internal. Like my own memory had turned against me, rerouting signals, projecting images I hadn't earned the right to forget. The next night, I caught myself talking aloud, repeating her name, whispering dates, orders, coordinates, as if giving a confession to someone sitting just outside the frame of my vision. I stopped sleeping. I stopped drinking. Even the bourbon tasted like dust. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps at the door. No one there. Just a scrap of paper slid under the frame. No envelope. No signature. Just 4 words, written in the same hand from the note in the box. Don't you dare forget. I folded it once, then again, and placed it in the box with the photographs. I looked back at the shattered mirror. In the largest shard, my reflection was smiling. But IWASN single quotes T. It was just past 3 a.m. when the radio flared to life. I hadn't used the old receiver in years. It sat on the shelf above my desk, mostly dust and rust, tuned perpetually to static. But that night, the signal came through sharp, coded, unmistakable. The same frequency we used back in '62, long since decommissioned. My hand moved on its own, adjusting the dial. I hadn't forgotten the sequence. It was muscle memory now. Buried in the bones, the voice came on after the tone. Don't open more walls. A pause. What lived there didn't die. It waits. The line went dead. No signature. No cipher clearance. Just that one message, spoken in a voice I couldn't place. Genderless. Expressionless. But it carried the weight of something older than orders. Older than the agency. Like it had been waiting to speak again. I sat in silence for a long time. The room seemed thinner, stretched at the edges, like the walls themselves were listening. I replayed the tape from the hidden box, now dozens of times over, searching for anything, any breath, any anomaly that might explain what was reaching. Out from behind brick and years. Nothing new, just her voice. Still repeating the coordinates. Still asking for time. I drove back to Kreuzberg in the fog. Kreuzberg was empty, silent in the way only war cities remember how to be. The safe house stood exactly as I left it, boarded up from the outside. Now, but something had changed. The air vibrated, low and constant, like a far-off engine refusing to die. Inside, the wall hummed. I pressed my ear against it. No sound, but the vibration traveled into my chest, down my spine. Not mechanical, rhythmic, living. There was another cavity. I hadn't seen it before. Higher up, behind a panel that looked older than the rest. As if someone had sealed it long. Before we ever used the house. I didn't touch it. I marked it. I left. Back at my apartment, I found a note slipped between the pages of my old field manual. Same handwriting. She's not the only one. That night, I dreamed of hallways. Endless. Identical. Walls on either side. Each held a name I had once heard but never learned. Each sealed behind plaster. Each waiting. And at the center of them all her voice. Calm. Measured. No anger. Just a question. Do you remember who you chose? I woke up with blood on my shirt. From where? I couldn't tell. And when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't sure the reflection was mine anymore. I returned just before dawn, when even the cold didn't feel real anymore. The street was quiet, like it knew what I was about to do and didn't want to be part of it. I parked 3 blocks away and walked with a duffel bag over my shoulder hammer, gasoline, tape, gloves, cloth. I wasn't thinking in terms of consequences. I wasn't thinking at all. This wasn't about orders or evidence or the agency. It was about weight. About something I'd been carrying in my chest since '61 and could no longer name without choking. The house greeted me like it remembered. My key still worked. The door still creaked. The dust had settled again, as if nothing had happened. But the wall still hummed, soft, unnatural, like something trapped inside. Still breathing through stone. I laid down the bag and started swinging. Blow after blow. The plaster cracked, then split. I tore through the bricks with bare hands once. They loosened, skin scraped, fingernails shredded. It didn't matter. I wasn't building anything. I was tearing something out of history. Behind the final layer was more than air. There was writing, scratched into the raw brick. Deep, frantic. Sigo. Acqui. 3 words. Still here. It wasn't a message. It was a presence. A declaration that someone had endured long past the limits of breath and bone. I didn't know if Marion had carved it. I didn't know if anyone had. But the feeling that swept through me was absolute. She never left. Not really. And maybe none of us had. I poured the gasoline slowly. Every corner. Every inch of the cavity. The stench filled the room. I didn't light it right away. I sat in front of the inscription, listening to the faint hiss of vapor in the air. Waiting for doubt, none came. I took the match from my pocket, struck it against the wall. It flared like memory dot when the flame caught. It moved too fast like the space had been waiting for fire, like it had rehearsed combustion in silence for years. I walked out without looking back. The structure didn't collapse. It didn't explode. It just swallowed the fire like a mouth closing over a secret it had kept too long. By sunrise, it was still standing, scorched, blackened, but quiet. I didn't stay to see what survived. That wasn't the point. Redemption wasn't possible, but maybe containment was. Maybe fear was all I had left to offer. And maybe that was enough to keep whatever remained inside from reaching someone else. I still walk by Glogarstrage sometimes. Not often, just enough to remind myself it was real. The house is gone now, cleared, flattened, repurposed. A parking lot. Clean lines, new asphalt, striped with fresh paint. There's no plaque, no record, no trace. Just the absence of architecture. Like the past had been amputated, and the city chose not to limp. But when the sun falls at the right angle, I can still see the outline. The shape of the house superimposed over concrete. The curve of the old doorway. The window that never opened. The wall dot, especially the wall dot, it appears like a bruise beneath the surface. No texture, just a flicker in the air. And if I stand long enough, if I let the wind press against my back just right, I hear her again. Not her voice, not anymore. Her breath. As if she's standing just behind me, waiting for me to speak first. I don't. I never do. There's no redemption in this part of the world, no witness, no absolution. Just routine and reflection, and the slow erosion of memory until all that's left is sensation. Sometimes, in glass doors or train windows, I catch my reflection and hear her whisper. No firms. I never respond, because I already did. If this story left something echoing inside you, consider subscribing, and let me know in the comments if you ever heard of something like this. Some secrets don't stay buried.